r/NoSleep. Posted by u/Theeaglestrikes. In 8 days, I will wake up in 1999 and relive the past 23 years. I'm trapped in a perpetual Groundhog Day, but it's more than a day. The world feels a little grislier with every reset. I've always known that some sort of higher power was the architect of my eternal torture. What other explanation could there be? But I no longer simply know of that power. I've seen it. Let me rewind. I'm used to doing that, after all. I don't know how many times I've relived the past 2 decades. Enough times to slowly go insane. I've done some crazy shit in a manic attempt to break free. I actually thought I could end the cycle by altering the course of the future. During the present iteration, I haven't really bothered. I'm tired. So, you're experiencing the natural course of events, I suppose. Let's just say there was an iteration in which I invested wisely, became a billionaire, and spent my riches on changing the landscape of the world. I even paid extraordinary amounts of money to scientists who promised they could uncover the secrets of the universe. I thought they could fix whatever had happened to me. The problem is that I don't think they ever truly believed my story. They didn't really try to understand how a time loop would work, so their research was half-hearted. Nobody has ever been able to save me. And, before anybody asks, death is not the answer. It just resets the loop. I find myself waking up on the morning of December 31st, 1999. I celebrate the commencement of a new millennium with my family, and we admire the fireworks. At this point, of course, I've probably lived for a millennium. The horror of waking up in my 13-year-old body with a 36-year-old mind never fades. Or maybe I'm 3,600 years old, eh? Who knows? I'm certainly not counting. Anyway, I always detest reliving those teenage years. I pretend to be a normal kid and blend in with my peers. A few months after the first reset, I managed to calm myself down and seize the opportunity to make better decisions. Maybe it's a second chance, I decided. I took care of my health. I married the same girl, but I was a better husband and managed to prevent the divorce. I spent more time with our kids. I was a better version of myself. As December 31st of 2022 approached for the second time, I thought I'd done what the universe wanted me to do. You can imagine my unbridled terror when the loop reset. And that's when the penny dropped. I'm stuck. Madness ensued. 4 resets later, I tried killing myself. That didn't work. I tried hundreds of times in hundreds of ways. No luck. So, I've given up and resigned myself to this hellish existence. During every fresh iteration, however, I do try something new. I have to attempt to save myself, right? This time, I've posted about my experience on Reddit. That's new. I'm reaching out for help. Maybe I haven't fully given up, eh? I might say otherwise, but my actions speak louder than my words. I mean, I have to be honest. I've never gone completely wild. I've never completely ruined my life. I've stripped naked and run through the local park, but I've never, say, robbed a bank. I can't risk doing something life-destroying. What if the loop has ended? Every time I reach December of this year, I start to wonder that. It's what keeps me from entirely unhinging and doing something foolish. I don't want to endure this infinite torture. I guess I still believe that I can break free of the cycle. I believe in January 1st, 2023. I'm sure all of you will see it. Surely, when that day arrives, I'll have discovered a way to move beyond the loop. Eventually, I have to make it to next year, right? What's the alternative? I can't seem to die, after all. Well, that's what I used to believe. After a certain number of resets, I began to notice something disquieting. It started during one particular December of 2022. I noticed something watching me. It always happens during this final month. For instance, I might stroll down the road and catch glimpses of something in my peripheral vision. On street corners, I've seen a man with eyes that have no pupils. That's not all. I've heard things that other people say they can hear. There are shushing noises with no source. I wake up in the night, bathing in a pool of sweat, assured that I've spotted glassy pinpricks in the darkness. Sometimes, they rapidly vanish, as if the thing has closed its eyelids to avoid detection. Other times, the eyes linger, hovering in front of me. The thing seems to be getting bolder, and that haunts me. Last week, I was in an art gallery, and I saw a terrifying painting. My wife and friends said it was beautiful. They couldn't comprehend why I suddenly had a gaunt complexion. I suppose it would seem like an odd reaction. After all, the painting simply depicted an ordinary man. But I felt as if I'd take a stroll through the uncanny valley. His eyes were dreadful. Something about him was marginally off. And, for the briefest moment, the gallery light caught the painted eyes in such a way that the pupils disappeared. I found myself staring into the vacant eyes from various street corners in my darkened bedroom. They were boring into my skull. I whimpered in terror. The worst part is that I've been to the art exhibit before. On December 10, 2022, my wife and friends always drag me there. That painting wasn't there in any of the previous iterations of this loop. In that exact spot, there had been a painting of Big Ben proudly displaying 11 o'clock. And that's something which petrifies me. It means things are changing, and I don't think they're changing for the better. I have considered letting go. My fight is fading. Perhaps I should embrace the entity with open arms. Perhaps it has come to release me from this nightmare. It could offer a finite death and put an end to the loop. But what if it delivers a worse fate? Every time I see the glassy-eyed man, I feel my chest coil into a clove hitch. He isn't good. He isn't trying to save me. I need to figure out how to reach January 1, 2023. Merry Christmas. I've posted the first part of this story twice, but I know what you're thinking. Why repost the exact same words? In part 1, you said you were trying something new. You said it was the first time you'd told your story on Reddit. Liar. I needed to do things exactly the same way. I'll explain that. For brevity, I've devised a clearer reference system for each new iteration of this time loop. Obviously, there were thousands of iterations before these three. I1, the first iteration, I initially posted it on Reddit. I2, the second iteration, mistakes were made. I3, the third iteration, my current iteration. Something happened during I1. I barely made it out of that iteration alive, details will follow, but fascio I discovered I was on the right track. The glassy-eyed man is pursuing me more aggressively than ever. I think he has grown weary of lurking. I1, December 24, 2022. Merry Christmas. The man on my doorstep was a frosty fellow, so I thought of him as a somber snowman. He had not come to offer glad tidings or a tuneful carol. I knew that before he even opened his mouth. I quaked in horror, dreading what he might have to say. "Who are you?" I timidly queried. "Somebody who can help," he responded. "I saw your post." My breathing flattened. I rooted myself to the ground, too shaken by the menacing statement to muster any kind of reply. "Who is it, Jake?" my wife called. "The postman," I shouted. No matter how many lifetimes I lie, I despise lying to Vanessa. But the truth is too complicated. There has only been one time that I ever explained my looping predicament to her. She didn't believe me. She thought I was mentally unwell. Since that iteration, I've always kept it a secret from her. "How did you find my address?" I eventually whispered. "Does that really matter?" he replied. "I had to see you. I traveled a long way. I think I can stop what's happening to you." "Not here," I blurted. "My family's inside." "Time is not on your side," he firmly told me. "I'm trapped in an endless loop, so I beg to differ," I facetiously quipped. "It's not endless," the stranger coldly replied. "You feel the thing with no eyes getting closer, don't you?" Before I could pry my trembling lips apart, Vanessa appeared behind me. "Hello," she exuberantly said. The man weakly smiled. "Merry Christmas. I was just telling your husband that I must have foolishly left some of his parcels at the office in town." "Right," I added. "In fact, I think I should come down to the delivery office." "What have I told you about ordering presents late, Jake?" Vanessa mumbled, rolling her eyes. "I know," I smiled. "Don't worry. I'll be quick." Away from Vanessa's prying ears, we decided to meet at the town hall, which was only around the corner. Still, the drive to our rendezvous point was unsettling. I followed the man's black sedan in my beaten-up family car. No matter which radio station I chose, however, I was horrified to find that the same song played. "Stairway to Heaven." The once beautiful guitar passage now seemed to harbor a sinister secret. I turned off the radio, but silence didn't make the journey any easier. The disused roads of the festive season felt haunted. Trundling behind the mystery man's sedan, I stole glances at icy alleyways on either side of the road. Shivering, I kept expecting to see him. I was too petrified to breathe, fearing that the glassy-eyed man might find me if I were to gasp for even the smallest pocket of air. We parked on a quiet residential street and went for a stroll. The sun was descending on the nearby town hall, and the streets were starting to empty, but I was a little relieved to see at least some signs of life. Regardless, I knew that wouldn't keep the dark creature from me. "What makes time so special?" the man suddenly asked. I shrugged. "We all have it," the stranger answered. "Please, just tell me what." I was interrupted by the jarring sound of nearby lampposts shattering. The night embraced us like a thin blanket. Shushing filled the air like a ghoulishly glacial wisp of wind. I have never been consumed by such existential terror, and this is coming from a man who has been alive for countless millennia. I've even welcomed death with open arms. But that moment, above all others, truly haunted me. There are things worse than death, after all. Glassy spheres emerged from the blackness, hovering at the other end of the pavement. As hauntingly garish eyeballs illuminated the void which engulfed it, a black shape moved towards us. "Find me after you reset," the internet stranger whispered. "Time is dwindling." But the man did not have the opportunity to finish his sentence. His face lost its color. Those glassy pinpricks were suddenly occupying the stranger's eye sockets. My mystery visitor howled in agony, and his flesh started to incinerate. There was no fire, but you wouldn't know that from the sight and smell of the man's disintegrating flesh. Blackened, bloody strips of skin peeled from his skeleton. His wail was that of a dying animal, desperately crying for a savior that it prayed would emerge from the darkness. Nothing came to save the man. Collapsing to his knees, his clothes shriveling atop his melting flesh, the stranger's cries mutated into hoarse whispers. I saw his tongue wither in his open mouth. I think he tried to say something with his final breath, but all he could achieve was the most horrific moan. He was reduced to the blood-red meat beneath his skin. I suppose there were still gauntly eyes lodged in his skull. They weren't his eyes, though. Bereft of life, the man toppled to the ground. From his burned corpse, a specter ascended. Those soulless pinpricks materialized in the shadowy darkness, gazing into my soul. The glassy-eyed man did not speak. I, on the other hand, could not speak. Suddenly, there was pain. Unconceivable pain. I tentatively peered down to see a black limb, flesh composed of night itself, piercing my left shoulder. Terrified beyond comprehension, I tried to bellow in pain, but my fragile body could scarcely manage a whimper. When I woke, I was in my 13-year-old body. Of course. Death would have been too easy. The man was right. Time. We all have it. Some of us have all of it. Before I could fully process my surroundings, I realized that my body was in agony. Blood was soaking into the bedding from the wound on my left shoulder. My wound was still there. Immortality was no longer a foregone conclusion. The glassy-eyed man could end me. Following a hospital visit with my bewildered and traumatized parents, I resolved to change. I would no longer accept this existence. I might not survive my next encounter with the glassy-eyed man. And who knows where he might send me if he were to kill me. After all, there might be an eternal torture worse than my current one. I couldn't rid my mind of that petrifying thought. I spent years searching for the stranger who had knocked on my door. Unable to wait for the formation of the r/NoSleep subreddit in 2010, I decided to simply create it. I posted my experience on there. Nobody came to my house. In desperation, I posted on so many different websites, but I quickly realized my mistake. Surely, I needed to repeat events in exactly the same way. I needed to submit the post on December 23, 2022. I did just that, but there was no house visit. Perhaps I had already made too many changes to the timeline. Fortunately, I also avoided the glassy-eyed man. But I found myself resetting to I3 on New Year's Eve, 2022. I spent another 23 years waiting impatiently. Then, 2 days ago, I submitted the first part of the Reddit post. I worried that I might have worded it too differently to catch the eye of the internet stranger, but it worked. Today, he visited me. I ushered him into the living room and prayed that my wife wouldn't overhear us. I hurried the stranger through his persistent riddling. I wasn't going to let the glassy-eyed man consume him. "What's the significance of New Year's Eve, 1999? I asked. "Do I need to go back and fix things?" The stranger shook his head, and he offered, surprisingly, a succinct explanation. "A time loop is a glitch in the universe," the man said. "The entity is here to end the glitch that caused the loop. And he believes that the glitch is you. Something else is trapping you. Think, Jake. What happened in 1999? And that's when I remembered. My body tensed, and my heart filled with dread. Some boys were bullying a kid from our neighborhood. Pippa. A 10-year-old girl who never did anything to hurt anybody. The boys locked her in the old Hawthorne house. A derelict hellhole. I stood there, telling myself I wasn't complicit in the crime. I just watched. Inaction is action, I suppose. Whilst the fireworks distracted everybody at midnight, I slipped back into the house to rescue her, but she wasn't there. I assumed she had escaped and gone home. Over the following week, however, missing posters popped up. Pippa was never found. Even more horrifyingly, neither were the other 3 boys who locked her in there. All 4 children vanished before the start of the new millennium. I told the stranger this story, and he nodded. There are things in this world that defy reason. I've seen them. That's why I came to you. Pippa needs help, he said. I think she and those boys are still in that house. I don't think the Hawthorne place abides by the rules of time, the man whispered. What do you mean? I asked, shuddering. The stranger paused. Based on things I've experienced, I'd say it's an 11 shrine. An unholy place that ensnares people at the turn of every new year. Such places exist outside of space and time. Pippa is the force that keeps resetting your timeline, he continued. If you free her and the boys, you might be saved. They would be returned to the moment of their disappearance in 1999, but that would be the original timeline. A parallel universe. When I returned to the house, I couldn't find the girl, I said. Why would it be any different if I were to revisit it? I told you, the stranger said. An 11 shrine exists beyond the construct of space and time, but it creates a bridge to our world between 11 p.m. and midnight on New Year's Eve. How did you learn these things? I asked, suspiciously, though I was admittedly a little late. I don't think you're ready for that tale, he said. And even if I were to tell you what happened to me, could I not still lie? You just have to trust me, Jake. All right, I conceded. How do I need to prepare for New Year's Eve? When the man explained that I'd have to venture into the Hawthorne house at 11 p.m., I trembled in horror. I've spent Christmas Eve watching my family with teary eyes. Can I avoid the flesh-searing limbs of the glassy-eyed man for 6 days? I keep seeing those lifeless eyeballs in the darkest crevices of my house. Even now, as I write, I could swear I just heard shushing from our wardrobe.